Okay, so we're now live. This is Christophe Clugston coming to you from Cambodia with Ken O'Neill and Stan Brooks, who are both in the greater St. Louis, Missouri, United States of America area. We're exactly 12-hour time difference from each other and different climates, too, I might add. But we were coming to you because we want to get something cleared up, and that thing is, and a lot of people ask the question, that's why it needs to be cleared up. What is combat JKD? How is combat JKD different than all these other guys who are doing JKD? Because there are a lot of people doing JKD these days, because it's just the nature of the beast, I guess. So, Ken, what? How would you start off by defining how combat JKD is different than other people, or just tell us some of the conversations you've had when you have to
Yeah,
answer that
So
question.
this is kind of an easy thing to say, really. One of the biggest things that I would say that distinguishes us from many other approaches is that it's not technique based. It's process based. If I were going to try to make it more succinct, process based meaning that you're applying a philosophy and a methodology for how to uh, develop your abilities to spontaneously solve problems and resolve conflict. And I'm not saying how to just end a fight. I'm talking about this as a bigger picture modality of learning on conflict resolution. Back in my days, when Stan and I would train, when Stan would train me, he was focused especially a lot in the beginning on the bare bones of the body mechanics and drilling me on punching and kicking and being able to deal with blows coming in and footwork, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the more technical aspects, because that's how I guess how Mike wanted Stan to train me initially. But when I would be with Mike, specifically in classes with Mike, it was considerably different. Only in the sense that I was put in situations that would draw out what I could do with the tools that Stan was drilling me in. See, and there was some fear, and there had to be some on my toes ability to quickly formulate tactics to deal with the unusual challenges that he would create in situations. Okay, so that's very real, because you got to remember, part of why military training works so well is because the brain doesn't know the difference between simulation and reality deep down. If you do all the right triggers, if you trigger fear, if you trigger breath interruption, if you trigger tension in the body, well, it's all the same reactions that happen in a real situation. Here again, the simulation and the reality become very, very closely linked. And that's a lot of what I experienced. So we're talking about a process and a methodology is a lot of what we were trained to do and what we train people to do. So you're not just sitting there like I went through in karate classes in the old days, and you're just doing repetitions of certain movements, and you're doing them in set patterns. No, we did our work and learned how to say punch and kick in all kinds of weird angles and with limitations. I remember Stan would do stuff to me like stick a chair in front of me and then attack from, I don't know even know how much you remember some of the stuff you did to me, and I know it was Mike directed stuff, directly or indirectly. But Stan would stick a chair in front of me, and he would say like, well, you got to deal with the chair being in front of you, and either Stan himself or somebody else in the class would be attacking, and I had to be able to kick over the chair to keep the guy from getting past. I mean, we had to do all kinds of crazy problem solving stuff, which is exactly the kind of stuff you would run into if you got into it in a bar, or some guy ambushed you in your office, or at a bus stop. You had to adapt and flow. You weren't just always standing out there on a nice flat surface with a lot of lighting and little rules and stuff. Nothing of what we did was oriented that way. And there were always the elements of having to do stuff while you were a little nervous, while you were afraid, getting a little shaky. That stuff was there a lot of times. And sometimes it was even there more psychologically than physically. So this right here completely sets apart a lot of what we've seen over the years. And I in particular used to see when I would go to seminars that some, you know, they weren't really JKD, they were Junfan kickboxing, and in that everything we were doing was mimicry of more so of Bruce's drills that Dan would teach us in workshops, and that was a key focus. However, I have to sidestep from that a little, because even a lot of the training that Stan and I got and some of the other guys got from Dan when he started coming here to St. Louis in these private sessions in the mornings and all before the paying people would come in, he went deeper into things. He went deeper into explanations too. I know Stan will remember a lot of this. That to me was Dan was doing more JKD with us in those privates, I would say, than a lot of what we saw sometimes in the afternoons when it was the general public, because we could challenge things, we could ask questions, he would explain things in more depth, and that was very different from what would happen in the afternoons a lot. And I think it's because he had more time with us. He knew we'd already been teaching for years. He knew how far we went back with Mike and Carl, and that they had been doing a lot of stuff with us. So I'm sure those are the two main reasons why he did things differently with us. We were already teachers. He already acknowledged that. We already had you get into these afternoon sessions, and it's another story. These people don't all have the background, you know. So you know, it was different. Stan, do you remember this? How that came across? Is this sounding you remembering this stuff from back then?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely the way it went down, you know. So
even physically, Dan was a lot tougher on us sometimes. Very much so. You know, I don't know how well you remember this, and I don't remember which ones you were in with me and the ones that you weren't in with me with Dan. But Dan did some pretty freaky, interesting stuff to me several times. One time in particular, and this seems like something Mike would have done. One time we're sitting there, we are all pooped out. We've been doing nothing but Muay Thai drills. Bam, 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 bam. We're all there's not one piece of dry clothing on our bodies. Dan walks over to me, jumps up, grabs me around the neck, and wraps his legs around my waist and says, "Don't you drop me," and proceeds to move as quickly as he could around the perimeter of that big training room upstairs. "Don't you drop me. Don't you drop me." And the whole time he's doing this, he's cranking my neck as hard as he can, as if he's, you know, in a tight clinch, like you would pull a guy's face down and knee him, you know, and just putting me through some really weird, very strange stuff, you know. And see, here again, now we're slipping back more into that's a JKD type of a thing to do to a guy. See what he can handle, put him under pressure, test the endurance of his physical, to the limits of his physical endurance, and psychologically, how much can he handle this, and how much does he want to please you by not dropping him and maybe getting your ass kicked or whatever. So there were all those things happening. I wanted to interject that because that was a particularly strange and interesting thing he did that time. So go ahead, Stan. What do you think?
Yeah, it's good when you look back at your personal experiences, because, you know, the teachers at that time, the way I particularly was influenced by Mike is that he was highly creative and resourceful. And also his ability to read a person's psyche and personality was very critical, because he could actually formulate a training approach tailored suited for that individual. And this is how I gained more insight, possibly to Guru Inosanto explaining how Bruce would do it. I think the issue is this, basically, it's not one that's better or another, is that martial arts is like a journey. And you can start on the combative side, you can start on the technical side, you can start on the drill side, you can start on the conceptual or the philosophical side. But the ideal is to have the flexibility to be able to follow your path.
Mm-hmm.
So I always tell my guys, I can only give you what I have, and I know that I'm limited. So this is why I have no problem in networking them to go, let's say, to Ron Smith for Muay Thai training. My friend Norman Travis, who was my classmate and training partner in the John Fine that Carl James brought back to East St. Louis, to attend some of Inosanto's seminars to understand how to compose training drills. Okay, you really don't understand training drills until you understand the purpose of them, and you have the ability to actually create your own drills, because you know where your attributes are, and you can tailor suit drills to improve those attributes. So you gain insight. So you're not simply repeating a drill for the drill's sake. So they go on that path and that journey, and they stay honest. And I think that's one of the hardest things even Bruce talked about, to express yourself honestly.
Yeah.
Because, the human way is kind of lazy. We want something tailor packaged already. We want something already organized for us, okay? But, that's not the truth in life. You got to learn from a foundation. You got to create your own. You got to create your own individual path. And I think that's what kind of separates us from the others, because of the influence from Bruce to Guru Inosanto, from our teacher Carl James to Mike Sandlin. That influence is taking on a sort of a different tone, a different shape, a different direction. But overall, we have three different, unique, individual ways of expression.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing that really makes it, I think, unique and special in that way.
And Stan, another thing, you just brought out something really good. See, I personally, I don't have a problem with a lot of the guys that are doing what Christophe would refer to probably as the seminar approach, and it's more like mimicking the old Jun Fan way. So what? What's wrong with that? I mean, they haven't gone what we've gone through. They haven't been trained the way we have, so they're going to respond to the way they've been trained, and or how much they can read between the lines. Because Stan, you know as well as I do, maybe even better, that it's not like Dan does not give out that information, but a lot of guys don't catch it. He gives a lot of hints when you go back and listen, and then you've seen him in more recent years than I have, but I still remember. He throws out a lot of hints in ways that are a little more subtle sometimes, but he's giving you the food for thought. Like, case in point, I have to say this. Another thing he did to me one day when we were up in the training room doing a bunch of the Jun Fan modified trapping drills, I said, I just don't like this anymore. I just don't see much of a point for it. It's given me more sensitivity, my ability to get through a guy's guard, but I'd rather just blast through that and go right to grappling. And he's like, well, and I'm like, oh, but it still got me somewhere. I'm just to a point where I don't need that anymore, but that training still got me to that point. And that was the revelation that I had. And he smiled at him. He said, good, you got it.
Yeah. You need that experienced teacher to serve as sort of a sounding board, to give you the right feedback. Because see, you have civilian martial arts, you have combative, let's say the arts, in the war actually, which is military. They're distinct. They're distinct. And the way Mike trained us is that in terms of civilian martial arts, you got to understand tactics and strategy. It's more than just your physical attributes, because it's a more complex, environment. Your enemy could be the guy spying you when you're checking out getting your groceries. Your enemy could be the one that's looking at you when you're putting your car keys in your door key.
Yeah.
See, it doesn't come in an open way. And I know military is the same thing. So there's different emphasis. The only thing that I want to emphasize is that keep your journey moving, keep it active, keep it going. Okay, so there's no problem. Plus, if these guys too, if they want to understand, Guru Dan said something very important one time. To understand Jeet Kune Do, you have to have some background experience in Jun Fan, because you have to know literally what the term means. A lot of people practice it, but they come down, well, it means the way of the intercepting fist.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how do you train that? And what's the benefit of that? What's the value of it? So they need to research that, and they need to find an instructor that can actually take them through those phases. So I'm quite honest with my students. I say, hey, if Vunak was around, I had a wonderful experience with him. We sparred a little bit. I got feedback. He put me on my rear end, but I needed that, that lesson. Okay, failure's the best. You got Ron Smith. You got a lot of good people. So I can only give them an aspect, but they need to find their own journey. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And like I shared with you guys before, there was a point in time when training under Mike for about straight 6 years, Mike looked at me and said, you look too much like me. He actually kicked me out of class. He said, go find yourself. You can study another martial art, you can do it in the street, whatever, but you need to find your own self, because Mike realized he was a self-created martial artist. He was unique in that way. And that's what he wanted for all his students, to find their self. Okay.
See, that's good, Stan, because now that just explains something that, remember when we got him going at the West Pine Gym at St. Lucie, before the rec center was there, and Mike came in, he was teaching for a while, right? And that was right. I had probably gotten in maybe 2 years of Aikido in at that point, and that's the first time I'd been around Mike since I started that. And somebody told him I was doing that, and part of me was like, uh-oh, what's he going to think about this? But then right away he comes right up and says, hey, show me some of that, and I knew he'd already been exposed to it through Jamie, but still, and no, was he put off? No, it was like he was delighted. that I was exploring. And that's just another points to what you just said again, too. He was delighted that I was on my own exploring and doing other things, too, because that showed him something. And it's just what you said. Whereas we all know a lot of other arts, a lot of instructors, they would get pissed. They would not like it if you were out doing other stuff. Mike encouraged it, just like you said, you know.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, Christophe, what do you think?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing is, one of the things, see, I was at a different time period with Mike, and he was a lot more advanced on what he was doing. And I never trained with Dan or anybody else really in JKD. And by the time that I was a competitor to Vunak, and he didn't like me, and some of the other guys tried to snub me basically because my name was getting out, and people were saying, well, what's this comp at JKD? And they obviously had students and saw my tapes, and they were like, this isn't what we do. Yeah, it's not what you do. That's exactly the thing. And they're like, well, it's not JKD. No, it's not the JKD that you guys do, because when Mike trained me, I got to reiterate that Mike was a Vietnam veteran. He had a complete combat mindset at all times. That's how he emerged from street fights, by not getting killed, basically. And that was put into me. That was put into me, and I got it because at the time, obviously, it was like, I want to have the skill Mike does. I didn't obviously have the experience at that time period as Mike, so I had to take in his mindset and then go get the experience, which is what I did. But the factor, one of the things is that I've never been, and Mike wasn't, and I'm even less than Mike, because Mike is heavily attribute driven, and I realized that for the general public, that's why you can't get that many people to make it through, because it's like the same thing. How many people are going to make it on to becoming an astronaut, or on the Olympic team? It because of attributes, it precludes people. So, and when you start attribute fighting, using only attributes to win with, then you're putting yourself in a position like, well, okay, what happens when it's cold? You're in restrictive clothing, you're tired, you could be drunk even, then you're done. So I switched. I started going to looking at physical laws that apply to all species, actually. And that's where I made my break. That's when I started moving away from combat JKD and doing what Bruce said: move on, walk on, evolve, which is something that you don't see a lot of people doing. They're still arguing about what Bruce did in '67 or '68, and they're trying to imitate his movie moves, or they're just becoming traditional crystallized patterns of everything that they've been shown, and so they become a copy. They become a clone. There are so many Dan clones running around at this point in time, or clones of Dan's first students. There's a lot of UNAC clones, for example. They're all running around, and it's nothing new. They are not expressing themselves, like Stan was saying. You got to learn how to express yourself. And in my case, that's gone to eliminating, like Bruce said, subtracting. The stone carver that he's talking about subtracts from the rock. He doesn't add to the rock. Subtracts from the rock to reveal the image inside. Right. So I've always gone to limited. I want to limit techniques, because under stress, under fear, which people don't train under unless you're put under that, which I do put people under at a certain stage, that you will not respond. It's called the Yerke Dotson paradigm, and there's studies and stuff. And at our event, I'll talk about this. But there are psychological studies that have been done showing that you cannot, for example, under extreme stress, you can't solve math problems because your functioning drops down to your, as we say, you have a 3 different type of brain systems, and you have to get it locked into your reptilian brain. That's what you're going to do under the most stress, and that's how mobs act. They act at the reptilian brain level, and so you got to be trained at the reptilian brain level to respond. So that's why all these techniques that look good in a clinic and a seminar area that most people do won't work, because you can't pull them off when things have changed. It's called state dependent learning. Rossi and Rossi. People want to look up the researchers. You can go find it, which had a lot to do with Milton H. Erickson, who was a famous hypnotherapist. But the factor here that the thing that Mike, I never trained in a dojo with Mike. I never trained in anything resembling what would be a gym. And a lot of people, well, maybe that. Blah, blah. No, it's because that's where are you going to get into a fight in the dojo? It's not going to happen. Stan was talking about you're going to get someone's going to attack you. They're going to attack you in an elevator, maybe in a stairwell, in a hallway, when you're busy trying to open a door, get in a car. I did a whole seminar thing on how to handle getting in and out of a car, what to do. If you're in many situations revolving around violence in that locale. But there is the reality that if you train in one area, you cannot make the jump to the next area. It has to be isomorphic. That's one of the things I've always worked on, isomorphic, same form. So the same thing that NASA does, the military do. You have to be trained in the environment as close to the environment that you're going to be in, really. So that has always been, and that's what separated, and these are the answers I've given out for over 20 years, that we're isomorphic, the other guys are not isomorphic, that we try to eliminate techniques, they don't, they try to add, let's put Savat in, let's put in Kali, let's put in Dumag, a lot of these Filipino terms are only from the Filipinos who were in Stockton, California, who came over before World War II, because the Philippines from 1898 to 1948 were considered U.S. citizens. A lot of people don't know that, but and that's a very bizarre pocket of Filipinos and that's who Dan got hooked up with, and Dan is largely responsible for popularizing Filipino martial arts in the United States and elsewhere, actually. And Kali, and when anybody tells you they train Kali Salat, they trained in the United States. I know it. Because it's just a point of reference, though. And so in my exploration, I trained in the Philippines, in the Stick Center, which is Cebu, and I fought in Thailand. I trained in Thailand. I fought in Thailand, among other countries. And so my stuff's authentic. Everything I've done, I went after the source. When I found out that Bruce learned his grappling from Gene LaBelle, I went to Gene LaBelle. I'm not a second, third, 400 person down the line telling stories about hearsay. I'm a person who did the exact things. And that authenticity, I think, that really, to me, is what Combat JKD is about, authenticity. I mean, Stan, what do you think about that as a good descriptor? Authenticity is for.
Well, like I say, it's a journey. So sometimes you'll meet somebody at the point of their journey. Let's say they're just doing attribute training. They come into the martial arts and they're not that physically gifted, So you can look at it in both ways. You can look at it in a negative or a positive way, but you got to understand it's a process. The way I look at it like this, all of us have one thing in common, and it is we were trained by Mike Stanley, who was very innovative, very creative, and a very efficient martial arts. Okay, particularly he was a genius instructor. But when I look back at the lineage, okay, at the point, Christophe, where you were studying with Mike, if it wasn't for Carl, you would not have met the Mike that you met.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for Dan Inosanto, Guru Inosanto, Carl wouldn't have learned. If it wasn't for Bruce, we wouldn't have Dan. If it wasn't for Yip Man, we wouldn't have Bruce. So you see, there's a link and there's a correlation. Yeah. So sometimes you can compare which is stronger, which is weaker, which is better, which is worse. But Bruce says one thing that's very important. He said in his personal journey, he said he didn't look at martial arts like that in terms of comparison. What he looked at is that what can I learn and what can I take from that martial arts that could fit my journey, that could help me. So I thought it's kind of the quandary that we can find ourselves in, is when we objectively consider one is better than the other. But what Bruce said, I think, is very vital. He said, well, you have these arts, they may be weak in one area, but they may be stronger than another. Yeah. So he would ask himself, okay, what can this art offer me, instead of comparing it from one to the other? Okay. So in that way, I think there's like a synergetic connection to all of them. That's why, like I said, I tell my students, I'm very honest. I say, hey, you know, I'm not in the best condition of my life. My attributes are not what they were when I was in my 20s and 30s. You know, you need to see this guy. You need to see Ken. You know, you need to see, even if there's a instructor out there in St. Louis that doesn't like me or may criticize me, I'll still send my student to study because he has to find this for himself. That's the bottom line. And he's got to test prove it for himself. That's the same way Mike gave me all the freedom. He said, look, okay, you got so much for me. Now it's time for you to go out there and test prove what you got for me and find your own self-identity. So that's how I kind of deal with it right now. And like I said, I'm kind of an old guy at 68. So maybe that's the advantage of getting older. So you don't want to be king of the hill. You just want to say, okay, you know, you do your own thing, you find out what you can use, and what they say, que sera, sera, live and let live.
Yeah, and like you've alluded, we can't project our attitudes and our philosophy. I mean, it's kind of like you could talk to a tree, but if the tree's not hearing you, the tree's not learning anything, right? So we, just as we're saying here, we all have different things that we've gotten in expressing ourselves. We're true to the conceptual framework of JKD, right? And that can be so different for other guys because they didn't go through what we went through. So you can't put them down for it or criticize them for it. They're at where they're at. They're drawn to what they're drawn to. If you want to get metaphysical or spiritual about this, Dan and I discuss this every time we get together, and probably have for 35, 40 years. It's everyone's on their own path. We can't try to force feed our perspective onto other guys. They're still learning. They're learning in their own way now. But what we are doing with these talks and with the big workshop in November, we're offering them an opportunity, though, to open a door and to see something that could perhaps lead them into another perspective and another way of training that might make all this stuff come together for them in another way, or help them take the next step in evolution. Because maybe we are the vehicle that is going to open them up to the idea that there's something beyond that. That's what I think's happening here.
Yeah, well, I would not call it a workshop because it's 14 hours, you know. So it's a lot more than a workshop. A workshop's a lot shorter event than this. This is 14 hours. I will say some things here though, because one of the things that I did after because I was no longer in that part of the United States, is that I went on a massive reconnection with my roots, which are actually Occidental. So I started researching Occidental martial arts, and then I also tried to look at Native American Indian stuff, which is very difficult to find. You have to be it's oral history and stuff. And one of my students, Lance Horseman, is California Native American Indian, and he and I both, he was a major help in that area. We tried to look as much as we could into like the Cheyenne dog warriors and stuff. But every culture from the Aztecs to the Zulus has had some sort of codified fighting system. And here's the difference. Fighting is a zero-sum game. It is not a non-zero. So the metaphysical shit goes out the window because somebody's living and somebody's dying. And the thing is, Occidental arts actually had a thing like, why wasn't it all written down like the Oriental stuff where they'd write down, today I looked at some flowers and then I, practiced 5 sets of drawing the sword. The Occidental did. They had a saying during the Renaissance that the true and perfect methods will triumph, and the lies will get you killed. So they thought that because there were a lot of different masters making money at the time, masters of the sword, arms, actual master at arms. That's the term. And they're the guys were selling lessons to the noble people, and some of them were considered charlatans, and they were called to duels. And the thing is, that's the point. If you're a fighter, you fight. If you're a runner, you run. If you want to talk about stuff, you talk about it, but that doesn't make you. And you're not on the same level as somebody who does fight or someone who's survived it. And that was one of the things from Mike. Like, if you don't have that experience, then you don't know what you're talking about, and you can't teach somebody that either. You can't talk to them about what you've been through because there's no frame of reference. Like how do you explain the color green to a blind man? You cannot explain the color green. So words don't serve for that. You have to have operational experience, and that is the game that we're in. We're in the reality game. So there is a winner and there is a loser in real combat. There is, and that's what I deal with. And so my job is to keep people alive. And the best way to do that is the same thing that Mike did, is to change their mentality. And I do that as quickly as I possibly can, because they don't have 3 months or 4 months to analyze things philosophically and then decide that, oh, this will work for me. And it's a disservice. It's a disservice. So that's the thing. It's like direct. Bruce talks about that too. If you read some of his writings, he talks about trying to be simple and direct with application and in training methods also. But that's what he liked about boxing training. It was direct training for direct results, and that's what I offer. That's where I am at on this. But I understand the spectrum that we're trying to do here in November, which is the November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And the link will be below this on the YouTube to go to the page, learn more about it, and guys can be part of it. It'll be in St. Louis. Address is there in St. Louis on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. First is on Friday night, 7:30 to 9:30. And you can come just for Friday night, or you can come for the whole 14 hours, or you can come for just Saturday or Sunday. We offer all those options. So there's no excuses, but we need you to commit, people. You can't talk about it and say you're going to do it. You got to do it. But anyway, what I was saying is it's going to be like from the recreational level or the longevity level. I think that's where Stan is talking about, the longevity level of being in it, to all the way to the extreme violence level, which is where I'm at, and then Ken somewhere in between longevity and violence. It's like, where do you find Ken in the bookstore? In between longevity and violence, extreme violence.
Yeah, you guys got to realize who's your audience. Who are your students? I mean, in the past, and this even happens now. Like my senior student started when he was almost 17, came in, trained, and went into the Marines. So he was gone for a few years. Comes back out of the Marines, does some other stuff, becomes a cop. He's been a cop for 25 years now. He's about to retire. But the point being, when I've had classes with just him and another particular officer who's been one of my students on and off for some long time too, and a few other guys, like another guy I get who's with the Department of Defense for 20 years in a very, very dangerous, unique kind of a job that he had in Southeast Asia for a long time. Spent a lot of his time in Thailand as well, and Africa. But you get it. If I have a group of guys like that, I train them a lot different than I do a lot of the guys that I get from the normal walks of life, because the experiments I've tried are this. And I wanted to say this to clarify why I take the approach I take. One time I had recon Marines that came to me on their own back in the 80s. These guys, a bunch of young guys, found out through the grapevine. I had a guy who had been, I think he was 7th Special Forces. He was temporarily out here at the Army Records Center. I guess they didn't have anywhere to put him for a while, so they had him there just kind of sitting behind a desk. And through the grapevine, he heard about me. He came to me, and we did some really intense close quarter stuff. And those guys talk, and this led to some recon guys that found out about me, and they ended up coming here for a weekend. And so did I train them the same as I train most of my guys now? Hell no. All knife work I did with them was the nastiest, most effective, mean-ass stuff that I've ever learned. I don't do that in my regular classes. Now, I do a little bit of it to put pressure on people, to make them understand the difference between drills and a guy whipping a knife out and ambushing you when you don't expect it. And now we're taking a sidestep to, how do you do isomorphic stuff, right? How do you be in a classroom setting and yet put a guy in an environment which would be more the natural environment is. So it's simple. You use props, you know, you set up a room. I frequently set up a bar situation, you know, I bring out chairs, I bring out other junk. I set up Metrolink cars. I have a big, like a weight training bench. We set it up like you're on the Metrolink because we get a lot of attacks on the Metrolink here. You can create these things. You can create these environments within an environment. So here again, for me, what I find is you have to kind of have a happy medium blend between a class that's a lot of good fitness and flexibility and strength work combined with realistic self-defense scenario, you know, situational training, and go back and forth between that and high intensity applicational combat stuff. Because what I've learned is if I take the guys that function in that environment all the time, these tactical guys, my old FBI agent buddy who was out on drug bust, he was gathering intelligence on the drugs and the Crips in St. Louis, and that would go into the FBI database. He was out on the drug bust. He was in real shit all the time. You know, if you take the average guy and you try to train him like that 2-3 times a week for 10 years, you'll lose them. That's what I've experienced in all my years of doing this. Those guys don't stick around because they won't train that intensely all the time because their life isn't like that. So you have to come into a happy medium way of trying to make sure you're giving them stuff that's real, putting them under enough pressure and testing them at times so they are developing realistic skills, but not have the intensity so high all the time that they're leaving class every night injured, because I've done that in the past and that doesn't work either. So for me, it's tricky because I have to keep a balance between the more recreational guys and then the hardcore guys that really have to have this because of their environment, and then try to keep a happy medium with all that. And that ain't an easy thing to do. It'd be a lot easier to have separate classes for separate kind of guys, but I can't afford to do this full time right now and do that. So that's the tricky balancing act that I have. I just wanted to kind of clarify that that's why I do it the way I do it.
Yeah, I get that. It's like where I'm at is, you know, the same. Why do people go to tactical gun courses? Because they want to be able to defend themselves or be used to actual stress. Because paper targets don't shoot back. To make a Bruce Lee thing out of it, paper targets don't shoot back. And there are a lot of people who are fine who like shooting paper targets, and there's some people like shooting clay pigeons. That's fine, but you're not ready for someone shooting back at you. Yeah. So the people who go to those type of courses, what if you don't have a gun? Because nobody has a gun 24/7 in the United States. I don't care where the hell you're at. You know, I don't care where you are. And a lot of people have trained tactically and they don't keep it up. If they have taken a tactical course, they don't keep it up. So I'm the same position. I'm what you do if you don't have a gun and you're in the same thing. If you would shoot somebody and you don't have a gun, then you come to me. Because I'm the deep end. Like, what do people do when it's not all these things, you know? And people tell them, "Well, run away. You shouldn't be there." Well, that didn't solve their problem. I'm the guy. I'm the guy for that. That's the thing. Now, I mean, and not to get sidetracked here, because I wanted to get Stan's view on longevity, because one of the things that Gene LaBelle told me, you know, he felt that longevity was aided by, and not by the yoga craze that we see nowadays, but by some of the yoga practices. That's what he told me, you know, and that's 20 years ago when he told me that too. So, I mean, what do you think about that, Stan, as far as longevity goes?
Well, you got to, I think, very practical, because Mike influenced me to be very realistic and very practical, right? To always seek the truth and don't hide from the truth. Okay, well, I just came back from a seminar with Guru Inosanto a couple of weekends ago, and he's about, I think, maybe 82, maybe 83. And his movement is very good. I hope I look as good just at 72, okay? So he did share with me that he's done some yoga training, not this recent seminar, but in the past. The thing is this: if you're trained to be a warrior, you can't fight if you're sick. So the idea is that there has to be harmony. Your body can be very hard, right? You can have hard muscles, very sculptured muscles, but if your arteries are hard, you're gonna die. Okay? Okay.
Yep.
And there's
Yep.
a lot of people, even in athletics as well as martial arts. I've had several instructors just drop dead with a heart attack
Hey.
because they didn't know that there was
Yeah.
a problem in their cardiovascular system. So there's a part of us that can be hard, but there's a part of us that's designed to be soft. So that's what I mean. You need to have that balance. So, you know, like I said, so as a warrior, I think one of your goals should be longevity. Okay. It should be balanced. It should be fruitful and productive in life. You can be a very good martial artist, a tremendous fighter, but you can have a completely messed up life.
Oh yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
that,
Yeah. Who you telling? Who you telling? Who you tell- Mike is one of the first guys who will say that. Mike's the guy who told me that. Mike told me, here's something. Mike told me, you know, when I'm training all that time and I'm doing well, you know, and he's lying to me and telling me, well, I don't know if you're gonna, you know, get, you know, blah blah. Well, obviously I was, and but then he said at one time we were training, and he said, you know, I don't know if I should keep training you because I don't want you to end up like me, you know, and I ended up worse. But I was, you know, I was obsessed. I was obsessed with learning. I was obsessed with this because with the combat JKD, it was constant learning. It wasn't rehearsing. It was constant learning. Every time it was totally different than anything else, and I was obsessed with it. I'm like, you know, and I saw what Mike could do, and it was like superhuman. It was really was. You're like, you haven't seen somebody at that level before. It's superhuman what he could do. He could move so fast. He could do so many things with so much power. I'd never seen it from anything I'd ever been around before. You know, and I'd been in martial arts a bunch of different places, but it was just a different level, and it changed everything for me. He changed everything about instructor, what an instructor should be, because yeah, he was just definitely way better than anybody else, and he's the best teacher I've ever had. And I've gone around to famous people and all over the world and stuff. He knew how to cut out time. I can do the same thing, which kind of irritates me because it takes somebody like a week to show me something. I can teach that to somebody in like a day or two, you know, but Mike could do that too. He just, like you said before, everything's personalized. You have to. At Combat JKD at the high level is really one-on-one training. It's not a group setting. It's a group setting to get some ideas and paradigms broken. And I think that's what we're really talking about here. You're talking about, Stan, about a different paradigm, and Ken is too. Ken is like, we can show you a different paradigm than what you've been exposed to before. So I mean, we're covering a lot of different things here, but I mean, I really think it's about that paradigm, don't you?
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it too. That's a great way, you know. And if guys don't know what paradigm is, Google it. You can Google it, and because that's a great framework, you know. I think. Yeah. So hopefully we're getting this point across, and we're, you know, I in particular, and I know Stan in particular, we're not trying to step on anybody's toes based on what they're doing. I think a lot of it sometimes is just a matter of lack of exposure. So you could call it maybe a form of ignorance. I think a lot of these guys know there's something else out there within the whole JKD conceptual framework. They just maybe haven't been exposed to it enough. And once again, we're back here. We've been exposed to it, and we're all true to it, and that we're doing something similar and yet something extremely different all at the same time. And based on what we all just said in the last half an hour, I think you can understand we've been exposed to the same philosophy, but it's doing what it's supposed to do too, which is lead us on our expression of it, you know, clearly and honestly. And this is what is probably especially missing for you guys who have only been trained, like Christophe talks about, the seminar only trained guys. Because we were just saying this earlier, and Stan and I know this in particular as far as Sifu Dan, and that is that we got things I believe from him in those semi-private classes in the 80s that aren't always as easy to hear when you're in this big room with 50 and 60 guys, you know. We were in a room with 4 guys sometimes. There'd be 3 of us, 2 of us, you know, 6 of us. And a lot of these messages came through more clearly, you know, because what can a guy do in a room full of that many people? He can present the ideas. He can give you, give you some clues about it. But how many times, Dan, do you remember Guru or Sifu Dan? I still think of him more as Sifu because I relate more to the JKD and right, June Fun. But when he would say, you know what? He would say exactly what Christophe just said. He'd say, well, why don't you go train with, you go out for yourself and train with John LaCrosse. Go find him. Go to it. He used to say that stuff, if you want more, go to him, go to the source. He used to say this. He is open and push that too. I don't know if he does it as much now, but he sure did back in the 80s. I remember it crystal clear. I guarantee you I have videos. I have tons of video from those classes, and I know I can find it on there. By the way, at some point, we're going to put up a bit of one of those. I'm not going to put all of it out there, but I'll put up a little bit of that. For one thing, some guys hear us talk, and it's like, really? They really did this? Well, we'll prove it. We'll put up a little clip of some stuff of us back in the 80s, and then they'll see for themselves. They'll go, yep, well, that's Dan Inosanto. Look, there's Stan, there's Ken, there's, Jade Amato. Oh, okay. It's just a way to show them that we're not full of BS, So anyway.
Well, if Stan stands sideways, you won't see him because he's pretty skinny. So on some of that 80s stuff, I noticed that
he wasn't exactly fat.
I noticed that
we're back in those days. None of us were. I think I was 142 dripping wet back in those days. I trained my muscle off of it. I looked more like a Thai fighter. I'm just so sinewy. I just didn't have any fat. Neither did Ken. He doesn't now. But
Yeah, I know. Well, I meant Stan turned side.
What?
What's
that, Stan?
I said you were because I had a big
Stan
afro.
went sideways.
You had a big afro.
But he had the invisibility thing going down. You know what I'm saying? Like he turned sideways, and I was like, "Where the hell is he?" And I probably Mike probably told him to do that. But you brought up a lot of other good points there though, and Ken, and that the paradigm I really think is where we should. I think that's the best way to get people who don't know. But what you were saying about people coming in and they don't know, well, this is a good chance for them to find out.
Yeah.
Because what are they risking? Because like you're saying, they're going to the same old, there's an old Arabic saying from a long time, thousands of years ago, do what you've always done, get what you've always gotten. So you're not going to get something new by doing the same old tired routines. And I'm saying tired because if you're doing them so much that they're just rehearsal, then it's not learning anymore. So this is definitely that perspective on it. And I was gonna ask Stan about that. The perspective, the paradigm, the perspective. That's something that we have from Mike Sandler because nobody else has that paradigm. That's why Dan Inosanto told him to write the book. Mike's written for years to write it, and I was waiting for him to write it. I think Phil was waiting for him to write it, and Dan told him write the book. Because you're the guy, Mike. You're the guy to write that book. So we have that. That's probably why I seem. Once again, it's like the three bears, and I seem like the hard bear. And Goldilocks doesn't want my bed. You know what I'm saying? Or my porridge or whatever the hell it was. But yeah. But anyway, I know what it is. Okay, that's what I was going to say. Stan, what do you think about this? Okay, no analogy is perfect, but here's an analogy. All three of us got a special sunlight and water from Mike Sandlin, and you guys are from Carl James too. But we are three different plants, aren't we? We're three different plants. Yeah, I might be the cactus. I don't know. Ken's like the daffodil. Ken's like a daffodil or something. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, daffodil. Yeah, but yeah, we have to try to use a different type. What? We have to try to use different phraseology.
Stan, what was it?
Stan's what?
Stan's trying to say something.
Oh,
Go ahead.
yeah.
Oh, no, I'm just complimenting what Christophe just said. You know, in life, you know, you have, let's say, they say energy always moves in 3 phases. You know, a slow, medium, and fast. So we're like the light. I have the light touch because I'm more philosophical oriented. Okay, Ken is more the medium, and Christophe is the hard. That's the way energy flows, man. You know, that's why everybody's
Yeah.
a perspective, you know, and how it's linked and interrelated. And I think that's going to be the most impressive thing about this event. Rather than criticizing the medium, criticizing the hard, you see how all those, you see how it's energy.
Yeah, there you go.
Particular phase, yes. Okay.
Stan gets the gold star for that. That was good. That was good.
Well,
Yeah.
but what I'm hearing is a reiteration of the 3 bears again. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's
cooler because
you
I
know,
don't know about
which
damn bears.
on a deeper level, there's reasons for folk stories like that because, as Joseph Campbell said, they touch archetypes. You know what I'm saying? So Stan is touching on an archetype, and so is the 3 bears is touching on an archetype. And you'll find a lot of things are centered around 3. By the way, do you know that? I mean, there are a lot of religions with 3 things. There's a lot of stories. There's 3. You know, there's a lot of things that you have to do that are centered around. There's more numbers than that. Joseph Campbell did a complete study of this. He's not the only guy, but he was the one who was best able to present it to you, and you wouldn't fall asleep. You know, so. But I think that, yeah, I mean, that's the thing that we're offering because, and I tried to say that before, that we're 3 different types of guys, 3 different settings. You know, we're 3 different settings on the microwave here, and you're going to gravitate maybe to one of us more than the other, but you're going to see a spectrum. You're not going to be able to see this anywhere else. I mean, that's just point blank the truth, because you're never going to get what Stan offers with somebody who does what I do, and you're never going to get what Ken offers with either end of us. You know what I'm saying? So it's really an opportune time for people to take advantage, especially like I'm saying, JK, because you know we know people who like each one of us, our stuff, but there are JKD people out there who don't know anything about this personally, and they would like to because they go to a lot of, they're kind of like fans, aficionados of JKD stuff, and I'm certain Stan was with some of those people the other weekend when he went to see Dan, because Dan is, you know, he's on a kind of a fan circuit these days, you know, because he's got franchises built up, and they got fans that go see him everywhere, and that those are the guys I want to try to let them know. I'm trying to do my best to let them know that there's something else out there. Do this, and then we got 3 different paradigms to present of combat JKD, and 3 different philosophies, but we all share the same thing: truth.
By the way, you
That's
opened this perfectly to say this, and you were the one that said it last time too. Remember too that Sifu Dan acknowledges this approach. He has acknowledged this approach, so much so that he suggested Mike write a book about it. Remind them of the other part that he said when Cass Magda and you and Scott Dobson and Phil Rivera were standing there, and tell the guys the part about what Mike said related to what Bruce wished that a lot of his instructors would have done along the lines of what Mike did.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. Well, the whole, and I'll tell you that Gene LaBelle feels the same way, because I did that and he was very happy with me. And it's another story, but yeah, because Bruce always wanted to produce somebody who went out and fought and validated his theories, basically, and his training methods. And if you talk to Jerry Beasley, that was Joe Louis at the karate level in the competitions back in the 60s. Joe Louis was his representation of his ideas and stuff. And Joe Louis said, yeah, he did influence, he did help me, you know. But Bruce was really, because there was no NHB, no MMA at that time, you know. So that's the closest they could come. Now, this street fighting, scientific street fighting, is what Bruce Lee said in many interviews. He said he was creating a scientific street fighting, and who was doing that was Mike Sandlin. Mike Sandlin, and that is and that's what was said at that in that 1985 at the St. Louis University 3 weeks of seminars. And when we're out in the hallway, I think it's either lunch or at the end of the day, one of the two. I can't remember, but precisely because everybody was going to go eat, so maybe it was the end of the day. But the thing was that you're doing what Bruce wanted, and I know that made Mike feel good, although he didn't say anything about it. But he was the one who really did what Mike Sandlin really did what Bruce Lee wanted, was to 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 validate and evolve different things. And that's when Mike told me, you'll never trap in a real fight. He said the only thing happens, the guy's arm gets in the way and you'll do a pock. He said that's it. That's the far as it will ever go, And that's what you find. You talk to Jerry Beasley about what happened and what was going on. You talk to Dan, what was going on. Bruce dropped trapping because I mean, Ken, you and I dropped trapping. So there's other things to be done that are more efficient. So, and anyway, but that leads to Mike was doing an operational experience, like I said before, operational experience, and that's where you guys were. That's you guys. I mean, I got to put out something here too. People don't know right now, but you guys were the big famous guys back then. 85. CMAA was leading the way in the United States. You're responsible for the seminars that happened. Ken was the logistics guy, and that happening is what changed the whole generation. And there are guys talking like the Dwight guy who does the JKD dialogues. A lot of the people he knows and met were directly because of those seminars that you guys put on. You guys were the focal point in the United States. You allowed Dan to expand out. You're the ones where Terry Gibson came to, and Terry Gibson became somebody in the early 90s and stuff. He's dead now. But all these guys are because of what you guys set up and did. So there's a whole bunch of people who don't know anything about that.
Let me interject real quick too, and that's a good point, Chris. Yeah. But J.G. Amato really individually deserves to make credit on that.
Yeah.
He really went out of his way, sacrificed to make that investment, to make that possible. So this is why, we want to honor him as well.
Yeah. Well, we did a talk. We did a talk with Jay, and I just wanted to reiterate here, since you guys are here, about that. You can, we're hoping to something with Jay coming up, but Jay's the guy. Jay hunted them down. He hunted Dan down and did all that and set up the center and everything. But what I'm saying is, people don't know. They don't know, and so it's good to bring that out, because they're like, who are these guys? No, you guys were huge in the 80s. Huge. Anybody in the JKD, Kali, whatever, world community sphere factions knew you guys. And it's just, because millennials don't know you, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you didn't do what you did, just like, something like Ali or something. You guys did what you did. And I got to say that, I got to say, I got to bring us back to the root. And that's why we're doing it in St. Louis, because we're, as Stan would say, we're honoring where it happened. We're honoring where we were trained. We're honoring it by bringing it back as a rebirth, and also to reunite, and like, to see that daffodil sort of style that Ken has, the daffodil JKD style.
Grandpa wants to roll. Hey, what do we do in closing? I have to get into my job here.
Yeah. Okay. Let's end it, but let's end it on reiterating what's going on. So what we're doing, replay the whole thing. There's a lot in here. You need to watch it 2 or 3 times. Spread it around to your friends, especially JKD aficionados. November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 2019, right after Halloween in St. Louis. I'll have the link below this YouTube video. We're having a seminar. It's not a workshop. Seminar seminar total of 14 hours, but you can come on just Friday night if you want to. You can come Saturday or just Sunday, or you can do the whole 14 hours. It's your selection. It's open to you, but you got to come, and we need you to commit because we have logistics. We're 3 guys. We're on 2 different continents. I'm over 12,000 miles away from these guys right now, 12 time zones right now, 13 by that time, because time change will happen there. But you can't miss it because this is there are going to be things. We have special VIP guests, speakers and stuff planned. We can't release any of that information yet, but don't miss it. And that's what I'm saying. So you got to do it. I mean, you're going to get the wisdom of Stan Brooks. You're going to get the hard ass stuff from me, and you're going to get the daffodils from Ken O'Neill. Yeah. I find that funny. But okay, hang on though. But people just do that because we're going to go off the air now. But you guys hang on.